To introduce our guest speaker for today, Jennifer Erwin. She actually spoke with my medical student group back when I was a third year at ATSU Soma, and the lessons that she shared about really combating this sense of imposter syndromes, lack of self-confidence, especially with pursuing a surgical field. All those lessons really resonated with me and were things that I've taken since and have now been able to incorporate throughout my journey in surgical residency. Her background is she has a degree in psychology, and then she went and got a master's in education. And since then, she's done a lot of work working with particularly physicians in terms of things such as managing anxiety, managing burnout. And so I'm really excited that we have her here today to help emphasize some of those tools and skills that all of us need in order to be successful in our medical careers. So, having said that, thank you so much for being here. And there is a handout in the chat that everyone should take a look at as we work through today's workshop.
Thanks, Jane. I'm so glad to be back talking with a group of students, and I do hope that today's talk gives some tangible tools because the challenges that you face in medical school carry through. This is like really the foundation. So if you can get these right now, it really carries you through to residency, if you do fellowship, and like into your career, because I've been on the other side coaching physicians who have already they've carried so many of these patterns right to the end, and now they're wanting to like rewind and figure out the tools. It's never too late to learn the tools, but this is the prime time to learn them. So thank you for having me. Um, you're welcome to look at the worksheet. I also encourage you, we're going to do some reflective practices, exercises, just practicing some of the tools that I'm going to share. And so if you want to grab whatever you work with best, so if that's like pencil and paper, if it's your phone, if it's a doc on your computer, whatever it is, so that you can jot down some notes so you can practice along with and make it really tangible right now. So we're doing the work right in this moment. You're not just listening and absorbing, you're actually doing it. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay, that's popping up. Thumbs up. Okay, perfect. All right. So I would like to start with just like a really brief visualization. And I want to take you back to maybe like it was, imagine it's your first exam of medical school and you've spent weeks studying, you've had late nights, like coffee-fueled mornings, you've been going, reviewing every detail, and then the grade comes back and it's not what you expected. Because let's say in college you got all A's, it was super easy, you just did your work, and now that you're in medical school, it's not the same. And you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't what I expected. Your stomach drops, your thoughts start racing, and maybe you're thinking, did they make a mistake letting me in? Maybe I don't belong here. But on the outside, like you know how to keep it together. So you smile, you look confident, right? But inside you're panicking. Okay. So again, if this has ever happened to you in whatever form, you're not alone. Because research shows that nearly 1 in 2 medical students experiences imposter syndrome and about 60% report burnout symptoms. So these aren't just numbers. I want you to see them as reminders that doubt and stress are part of a bigger pattern. They're part of the environment that you're in, and they're not a personal flaw. Not a personal flaw. Okay, again, you're not alone. And maybe this example doesn't like, maybe you aced all your exams. So maybe it's not exams for you. Maybe it was like the first time your hand shook when you were in the OR, or maybe you were sitting in a lecture feeling like everyone's miles ahead. They're all raising their hand and saying super smart things. And you're like, I don't have the same skills that they do, right? Or maybe it's even just the buildup, the quiet exhaustion that builds up day after day of like just trying to keep going and powering through, like absorbing the fire hydrant amount of information that you have to absorb. Okay. And so nearly every student and even doctors later on in their career, they often still ask, am I really cut out for this? Is this really for me? So today I want to explore some practical ways to answer that question so that you can respond with resilience and confidence. My intention is by the end that you're going to have some really concrete tools to build confidence, bounce back from setbacks, and most importantly, approach yourself with some kindness and self-compassion. So here is where we're going today. Making sure my screen is check in. Yes, okay. Here's where we're going today. We are going to be focusing on just understanding what do we mean by confidence and resiliency? What does this mean in medical training and why they're really essential for thriving and not just surviving? A lot of people survive medical school and the further training. And what I'd love for your experience to be is that you have moments of surviving because that's the reality, but a lot more moments of thriving. It isn't a given that you have to just survive. You really can thrive with some of these tools. And so I have three key strategies that I want to share with you. And the first is self-compassion. Then we're going to talk about a growth mindset and then the tool of cognitive reframing. And these are all evidence-based, research-based tools that have been shown to reduce stress, quiet self-doubt, and then help you recover faster and better from setbacks. And then we're going to just talk about like some situations that you might be experiencing in your day-to-day life in medical school and how these tools might show up and might help you. Okay. Again, goal and intention is that you walk away with these strategies so that you feel more confident, resilient, and really prepared for the ups and downs of this whole journey through your medical career. So a little bit before we dive in, I just want to share a little bit about me and like a quick note on why this matters. Um, like Jane said in my intro, that for the past 9 years, I've been coaching physicians that have been struggling with burnout, self-doubt, and imposter feelings. So even though I'm not a physician myself, I have peered into the brain of many physicians and have coached them on these things. And many of these patterns, they can trace them back and they're like, oh yeah, that started in medical school. Like maybe there were patterns in like high school and college, but they really got ramped up in medical school. And these are things like how you talk to yourself, how you handle setbacks, how you recover from stress. These really lay the foundation, and they're the ways, like the coping strategies that you learn now are the ones that you carry with you into your career. And then it's also personal to me. So I've experienced burnout firsthand. I am a former teacher, and early on in my career, I hit a wall where I was just completely burned out. And learning strategies like self-compassion, growth mindset, and cognitive reframing were tools that helped me get out of the burnout and also stay out of burnout. They've helped me recover and I use them. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm in the small business world, entrepreneurship. There's high rates of burnout here, a lot going on, and I still use these same tools. And I use them in my personal life. So we just got a puppy, super fun and super stressful. It's like knocked our lives upside down. And I can list these three strategies as ones that have helped me in the last 2 weeks just get back on my feet and become more resilient in the face of, a shift in life. So, again, everything that I'm sharing today is not only personally lived, but it's also research backed. And I want you to be able to use these tools as soon as possible. So, let's dive in. So, just to get on the same page around what we're talking about with confidence and resilience, because there's terms that are thrown around, I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing today. So, confidence is defined by the American Psychological Association as the belief in one's ability to succeed in specific situations or accomplish a task. And I want to kind of just simplify that in lay language, maybe, trusting that you can handle what's in front of you. So to me, it's really about self-trust. It's not about perfection. Sometimes we have this idea of a confident person is like having it all together, and it's more like even if I don't have it all together, even if I'm imperfect, I trust myself to figure it out and get to the other side and be stronger. So it's really about having that core of self-trust and knowing that you can develop, grow, and then ultimately succeed in specific situations. Okay. And then resilience, the definition that I found, I can't remember where, off the internet somewhere, maybe a dictionary, was defined as one that's well accepted, is adapting well in the face of adversity, stress, or setbacks, which, I mean, that's like your lives right now, right? Like you're facing so much, okay? And I want to be really clear that it's not about toughness or ignoring stress. I want to, when I visualize resilience, I think of it as like a spring, and it's about having the bounce. You want the bounce in the spring. And what I find is that a lot of physicians that I work with have powered through. They are strong. They would have like kind of like like the extreme end of grit and resilience. They're like, but they've stretched that and they have no bounce left. It's like they've just powered through. And they often end up in burnout. So, what it is to me is like learning, like, okay, here I've been stretched. How do I come back to center? How do I keep bouncing back? Like, oh, this situation challenged me. And like, as the cord, you're stretched out here. What are the tools that will help get me back here so that I can keep meeting whatever challenge is coming towards me? So it means really that you know how to take care of yourself so you don't end up in burnout. Okay. And again, you know that this matters because medical students face higher rates of stress, burnout, and imposter syndrome than most graduate students. Y'all are in a pressure cooker. So I want you to take a moment and think like, if I had even like 1% more resilience or 1% more trust and confidence in myself, if you already had that, if I could wave a magic wand and you've got it, how might that shift your experience this year? And you can write it down or just like think in your head right now. But if you had that little bit more confidence and resilience, how might that shift what you're going through this year? Just take a note. And you're welcome to like write things in the chat if you want to share. We're going to be talking about common humanity. So the more we share, the more we validate that these are experiences. And I have found, because I have done workshops both for people in the medical field and in the personal development growth world, and I can tell you that the chat is often really quiet in medical settings, and that is totally okay. This is like a vulnerable topic. But so don't feel pressured to put anything in the chat if I invite it, but you are always welcome to. Okay, so if confidence is trusting your capacity to handle challenges and resilience is all about bouncing back from those challenges, let's talk about how we actually build those skills. And there are lots of ways, but these I find are the foundational ones. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is the trickiest one, and I feel like it's the one that people are like, ugh, like, does this even have a place here? But it's the thing that I think actually is the foundation of the house for all these other things. So, self-compassion is defined as by Kristen Neff. So, Kristen Neff is the psychologist who's done the bulk of the research and the work around defining self compassion and how it impacts us. She just defines it simply as treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a good friend. Which, if we think about it, we often have a lot of negative inner talk that can happen. And so it's really not about the things that we worry that it's about. It's not about like letting ourselves off the hook or demotivating ourselves. It's really just thinking like, how would I talk to a friend in this situation? How would I treat them? And how can I do that for myself? And there's three very specific components. So the first is mindfulness, and that's not the same as meditation. It's simply noticing your feelings and your body sensations without getting lost in them. And I would include your thoughts in that too. It's just being aware. And I know a lot of you all know this, so just beginner's mind, put it back on. We're just renaming these things. So mindfulness is the first component because if we're struggling, which is when we give ourselves self-compassion and we need to treat ourselves with kindness when we're struggling, if we don't know that we're struggling, if we're not aware of that, if we're not building the self-awareness of like, what is actually happening? What feeling am I having? We can't offer ourselves kindness or give ourselves what we need in that situation if we aren't aware of it. So that's why mindfulness is the first step. And it's mindfulness is actually a important step to all of these cognitive tools. And it really just means bringing ourselves to the moment and noticing without judgment what's happening. The second component, which is the one I actually love the most, I often, when I'm working with physician clients, I'll have them take a self-compassion assessment before we start and then after we start. And this third component is the thing that often changes the most. So common humanity is really just a reminder that struggle is shared and not a flaw. To be human is to struggle and to suffer. Like there's no one who escapes that. And to remember, sometimes when we are struggling, we can get locked in and feel like, oh my gosh, this is a personal flaw. There's something wrong with me. And this component of self, like, actually, I am not alone in this. I guarantee you that if you're struggling with something, like 90% of the other people in your class are also struggling in some way with this thing. Maybe it's a different degree or, a different level, whatever, but it's not just you. And also, I sometimes like to think about all the people who have like ever gone through what I might have gone through, and they probably had those same feelings too. So it's just this reminder that we're not alone. So we're going from like remembering that to struggle is to be human. And this is often the thing that can be most powerful when we shift. And then the last component of self-compassion is the one we often think of, and it's also the one we often struggle with the most. And it's really juxtaposed to using self-kindness versus using harsh self-criticism. And again, I want to just note the misgivings that all of us have. I still have these misgivings inside myself because we often believe that it is our harsh self-criticism or even kind of the negative self-talk is the thing that's keeping us motivated. And I want to name that it does push us forward sometimes, just like any sort of punitive method will. There's this really great example of two trains and self-criticism. Am I still coming through? It sounds like yeah, okay. So self-criticism is like a coal-powered train. So it can get you to where you need to go, but it creates a lot of pollution on the way. So having a critical stance inside yourself creates a lot of inner stress. It makes us feel like we're under attack. And when you're already in an environment where you are facing a lot of external stressors, you don't want to add to that. You don't want your inner experience to also be stressful. And so we often get attached to thinking like, I have to motivate myself. If I berate myself, I'll do better next time. We get trapped in this belief, or we think, oh, well, if I'm kind to myself, that means I'm letting myself off the hook and I'm just going to become a blob on the couch and just watch, um, Netflix all day and eat ice cream, let myself off the hook, or I'm going to be, wallow in self-pity. We all have these fears, but instead we can think like coal-powered train, self-criticism, it can get us there, but there is actually another way. And that's with this kindness model is like an electric train. Like it still gets you there, but it doesn't create the pollution. And I want you to think instead of like, sometimes when we have the word kindness, we think of it as really soft. And I want you to think of like your favorite teacher, the one that like really demanded excellence from you, but also encouraged you. Or maybe it was a coach, or maybe you have an amazing parent who does this. And this voice or that person is both kind and firm. They're holding strong. They're not going to like let you not live up to your potential. They're fierce in that way, but they're not going to be harsh and they're going to offer understanding. So sometimes the example is like if you imagine a high school student, they've bombed a math test, they come home, tell their parent, and if the parent's coming from the stance, they're going to offer understanding, like, oh my gosh, that sucks. Like, that's not the grade you wanted. And they're going to empathize and offer that. And then once the student has calmed down, they're going to then make a plan with that person and say, hey, how can we do better next time? What's your plan? How can I support you? What supports do you need? And so I want you to think about that. Self-kindness is really like a really awesome coach or teacher or mentor who's like cheering you on, believes that you can do your best, and is going to be kind to you when you're failing. Okay. Um, and I think this is really important because medical culture often encourages perfectionism. It's just a thread that comes through. And like, you can't be perfect. Even a robot makes mistakes, and we're not robots even. And so we just need to have this perspective of being able to know what's going on for ourselves, remember that to err is human, to struggle is human, and to have that really strong voice that keeps us accountable, but is also really kind, really helps us kind of combat that perfectionism that says there's only one way and I have to do it right all the time. And there's a wealth of research. If you're a research person and love to know like the data on the worksheet, it gives you Kristen Neff's site and she has a link to all the research. But there's tons and tons of research about medical professionals and then students in general. And it just shows that people who measure high on self-compassion, they're just recovering faster. They're actually more motivated. If you think about it, if you're hard on yourself after a test, it's harder to get motivated to study again. But if you like honor your feelings and then make a plan, you're going to do better. They also experience less stress, less depression. There's like a whole host of positive benefits to being self-compassionate. So let's practice. I invite you to, and if you want to think this through in your head, that's totally fine. But I want you to think of a moment that you were critical of yourself. Maybe you made a mistake, maybe you flubbed, maybe you think you said something stupid. Just bring it to mind. And I would choose something if we're talking about a scale of 1 to 10, choose something under a 5. We're just choosing a minor thing where you're like, oh yeah, I was kind of hard on myself there. So if you can picture that experience. And I want you to think, how did I talk to myself? What did I say to myself? What was like my inner stance? Was it aggressive? Was it, you know, how was the tone when you were talking to yourself? And how did it feel inside of yourself when that happened? And maybe even what actions did you take as a result of that by being critical of yourself? And then I'd like you to take that same scenario and just transfer it to like a really good friend, not an acquaintance, but like a really dear friend. And imagine that this friend like called you up or sat down, you met up with them, and they were in the same boat. And how would you talk to them? And just reflect, how is that different? Most of us would never say the things that we say to ourselves to a good friend. So that's really what this is about this practice of self-compassion is really thinking like, how can I show up for myself in the amazing way that I do for friends? Because really doing this frees up energy to learn and adapt, which are the things that you need to build confidence and resilience. Again, like I said, if we're creating an inner environment that's really stressful and we're in an outer environment that is also offering us a lot of stressors, it makes it really hard. So we want ourselves to be a safe haven when we're in this more stressful environment where we're also trying to learn and grow Be curious. It's hard to do that when we feel like we're under attack and our amygdala is going. We think there's something wrong. We're back here in the back part of our brain instead of in the prefrontal cortex, which is where you need to be to solve problems, to keep learning, to connect well with other people, all the things that help us thrive. Okay. And again, if you have questions, it sounds like pop them in the chat and I will be so happy to answer them at the end. All right. So let's move on to a growth mindset, which maybe is blah. We hear a lot about this. So it is a term that we hear and it's really hard to apply. So if self-compassion is like having an inner ally, a growth mindset is really the strong belief that skills can be developed. And like Carol Dweck is the big person in this field, and it's really defined as the belief that your abilities can improve with effort, practice, and feedback. And I'll highlight that feedback part because y'all are swimming in feedback all the time. And I would even say that it's pretty amazing how much we can change as humans. Like we've learned, we used to think that like personality traits were set in stone and like things people couldn't change after a certain age. And it's just not true. Like with neuroplasticity, like we can really alter the way that we experience life and even how we show up. We have a lot more control over that than we believe oftentimes. And so with a growth mindset, it's just acknowledging that and remembering that. So there's three key things that I want to touch on. It's just this idea that abilities can be developed, your skills grow with effort and practice, versus this idea that your talents are fixed, that you're either good at something or you're not. Like you're cut out for this or you're not. You know, it's very limiting. And this is reinforced in our culture all the time. And I think it's actually really hard when you are really smart and good at a lot of things, which if you're here, that is true for you. So a lot of things have been easy or come naturally to you or you have been good at. And so sometimes you haven't had to struggle as much as someone who maybe isn't as good at a lot of things and has had to learn this belief that, oh, if I put forth the effort, I can actually get better and better, right? So talent gets us so far, but the real skill is that you can always keep improving. And actually, it's been shown that the areas that you can improve the most in are areas that you're already pretty skilled at, which is good news of like, okay, I'm not just static. It's not like, oh, I'm good at chemistry, and so I don't have to worry about it anymore. Or like I aced anatomy, and so I don't ever have to study again. Like that it's always about improvement and putting forth the effort and practice. Okay, this is another big one. And I just want to name that this is hard in medicine, and it's something that I talk to my clients a lot about because they're grappling with this. To view mistakes as learning opportunities is part of a growth mindset. And in medicine, probably not where y'all are right now, but like down the line, mistakes have high stakes in medicine. Like if you make a mistake, it could be life or death. And that's not true for a lot of people out in the world. Like we make mistakes and we feel like they're epic, but someone's life isn't on the line. And so I just want to name how hard it is to really embrace this within medicine because it feels so essential and important that you not make mistakes. And I will also say that, but if we get too attached to like, I can't make a mistake, it actually makes mistakes happen more because again, it like makes us grip instead of remembering that again, it's the self-compassion piece. You are human. You are going to make mistakes. You might even make high stakes mistakes. There are many, many doctors that have. They've missed an important detail that didn't lead to the right diagnosis or catch it early enough. Or, they made a call that wasn't the right one in that moment. And if we spend so much time berating ourselves or not being able to learn from those mistakes, we don't reach excellence. We have to keep learning and growing. And so naming how hard it is to move into this mindset and how important it is, and ultimately starting to trust that the more that I can practice this on these small things, that it actually makes it safer overall. Because again, the more that you feel safe inside yourself, the more access you're going to have to that prefrontal cortex, and you're going to be able to make better decisions. You won't be perfect. There are really great doctors out there that have made mistakes. So again, you're not alone, that common humanity piece, if it ever happens to you. But it is important to embrace it as part of the learning process so that we can keep learning. All right. And then the last biggie is that feedback fuels growth. So, really taking feedback as information to improve and not a verdict on your worth. And I'm going to say that again. So, really viewing feedback as information to improve, grow, or even just information and not a verdict on your worth. Just knowing, bottom line, that your worth is never on the line. Your self worth, not on the line in feedback. Your worth is different than your choices, actions, learning. That's a whole separate thing, and they're not connected, even though they often feel like they are. Again, I can just rename, and there's so much research out there about the growth mindset, and students who have one, have developed one, have learned one, tend to be more resilient, more motivated, and they actually perform better over time than students with a fixed mindset. All right, one more thing that I want to name here is that the research also shows that environments that are set up within this mindset that like mistakes are okay, they're learning opportunities, and that a student's abilities can be developed, and that feedback is supposed to be an opportunity to learn and grow. It's a positive cycle. So if you're in an environment that everyone's on the same page around a growth mindset, it's much easier to embrace this. And I just want to say that some of the environments that you might be in, are in, may not be supporting a growth mindset. The teachers around you, the other people, they might be coming from a more fixed mindset. Again, this is why I started with self-compassion. So it's a note that like, hey, this is hard because I'm trying to develop a growth mindset here. And it's clear to me that like this person believes that mistakes are not all right, or they have already determined that I have a certain set of abilities and that that's not changeable. Okay, so you will have situations that are not set up to nurture or expand a growth mindset, which stinks because that actually fuels better learning and growth for everyone around. And environments that are steeped in a growth mindset actually outperform environments that don't allow for these things. But that's the reality of our world, is that you are going to encounter places where the growth mindset is not encouraged, and it will be hard to hold it within yourself. And it's still important to be vigilant around it because it's important for you, and the encouragement to find the community spaces, other people, mentors where it is encouraged. Seek those out, hone in on them, really as much as you can surround yourself with people that are on that same wavelength. Um, Okay. I feel like I'm going to step off my soapbox. Okay. Also a note that we're not usually all or nothing. It's not like we have a growth mindset or we don't. It's usually that there's certain areas of our life that we have a growth mindset in, and then some areas where we have a fixed mindset. So it's not like, you know, you, yeah, it's not all or nothing. So we're in this next reflection, we're going to kind of think on that because it's likely that you already have areas where you're already doing great with a growth mindset. And it might just be about, using that same thought pattern or way that you're approaching it in an area where you're struggling more with a fixed mindset. And it's normal to have both. Okay, so let's move into a place of more just thinking about these ideas. So if you want to get out what you're writing on, or close your eyes if that feels okay. So I want you to think about an area where you remember feeling incompetent, but now you feel good about. So, like a really tangible example for me is always like, oh, learning to drive a car. I can remember how stressful that was and how like awkward and weird it felt and how overwhelmed I was by not knowing what I was doing. And now like driving is, you know, mindless. No,
If I
you should be
can
mindful in the car.
If I can share an example, because
Yeah.
when you presented to me as a third year, the thing that popped up for me was actually research and
Mm,
feeling like I didn't have a support system, I didn't have guidance, and I felt just lost. And I kept thinking, I'm trying to pursue orthopedics. How on earth am I supposed to get research? And I felt this constant insecurity. And I've used a lot of the tools that you're talking about here to help focus on, okay, I might not be able to change my environment. I might not be able to have an institution that has a bunch of resources or financial support, but I know that I have the intrinsic capabilities to seek out resources. I have those abilities to find ways of always growing and learning and that curiosity to figure out how can I get better. And I've now been able to transition to research being a strength on my application. And part of the reason for OrthoLink Scholars was how can I then help other people with that same feeling of the external environment is not conducive and is not being supportive. Now, how can I help do that? So I just want to emphasize to everyone in the audience that whatever that is for you and whatever stage of training, I hope you really take these things to heart because I remember so vividly as a third year medical student hearing this and immediately thinking, I'm not going to match an ortho because I haven't been published before, because
mm.
I don't have an orthopedic mentor, because I don't have X, Y, and Z. And now to be on the other end, so to speak, where I'm still learning and growing, but that mindset of trying to realize that that doesn't make you any less capable or inadequate, but it is on you and your responsibility to constantly be seeking that growth. So, hopefully, everyone here, whatever you're reflecting on, just know that that doesn't mean that you are going to be stuck there and you have every potential, like Jennifer is saying, to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, thank you. That is such a, well, one, that touched my heart, knowing that that's because what an amazing thing came from that. Like we can go to that place of like looking for silver linings when we don't need to. Like sometimes things are just hard. And it did, and I think that's too, the self-compassion piece. It stinks that you didn't have the support that you needed. And like you had the resilience and the confidence to be like, hey, I actually have the skills to get curious, to keep going, and look at what I can create from that. Again, like sometimes it's out of the mud, creating something great. And I'm so glad you powered through because that means I'm here tonight. And you're here doing your good work. Okay. So thinking about that of like and using those tools and I'm sure you thought about like okay, where have I also like utilized those skill sets? Where have I been curious? Where have I overcome a challenge, right? So using that reflection of like okay, if I've done this in the past and I have these skills, how can I apply them here in whatever challenge you're facing? And then I want you to think about what really lights you up. What's an area that you feel passionate about? Where do you love to learn? And once you have that, just noticing you probably already have a growth mindset in that area. So just thinking about what am I telling myself? What's the story that I'm telling myself when I'm learning in this area? What am I experiencing? What am I doing? What actions am I taking? And I want us to keep this in mind because I think it's also confidence comes from being in touch with what you really care about and what you love to learn and focusing on those areas. There's nothing wrong. Sometimes we're talking so much about struggle and trying to apply a growth mindset to areas that are hard, but I think it's totally good and it actually makes you really authentic to approach things that you really love and care about. It's important to improve in the areas that need improvement. And what makes life fun and what's going to help you thrive is really figuring out what lights me up about medicine and really focusing there. We're going to tag that for the comparison conversation later down the line. Okay. So if you take what you're thinking and doing in this area that you love, and you think of an area that you're challenged in, where you believe you're not really good at it, just jotting down like how could your story change with a growth mindset? What can you apply from what you learned? I love your story. That's such a good one. Like, where are you challenged and how can you use a growth mindset to kind of come out on the other end and maybe create something beautiful or come out stronger, stronger even in just your sense of confidence and self-trust. Okay. So if we have self-compassion, it's helping you take care of yourself. And a growth mindset is showing you that your skills aren't fixed. Nothing's set in stone for you, right? If you're bad at presenting now, that doesn't mean that you're like doomed to just dread presentations all the time. Doesn't have to stay there, right? Let's talk about this last one, which is cognitive reframing. And I really like, I put this one here deliberately because I feel like self-compassion is the base. And then if you can embrace a growth mindset and it kind of works together with self-compassion, and then if you can use the tool of cognitive reframing with both of those things, you'll just skyrocket in this capacity with this tool. It really helps if you have a kind stance, a kind and understanding stance inside yourself, and you're geared towards a growth mindset. It'll help you come up with new thoughts. So, the definition, it's from CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy. It's really just noticing your story. And it could be like after the fact, after a stressful situation, or hopefully once you get really good at it. I've had a couple times where I'm like, catching my thought in the moment. It takes a lot of time. So again, patience, kindness while you're learning all these things, but noticing your story. I like to think of it as like popping the hood in your brain. A lot of times we have so many thoughts that we're thinking that are just automatic and we don't know what we're thinking. So, like peering into our minds, noticing the story, and then shifting, noticing how that story affects us and how what actions we're taking, and then shifting it to a more balanced and useful perspective. So, it's really about not taking our thoughts so seriously because we get really attached to our thoughts, especially our negative stories. And I want you to imagine, and this is true, that thoughts are just electrical impulses and chemical signals in the brain. But we react to thoughts as absolute truth. But they're just neural firings. I sometimes like to think of when I've got a lot of stuff in my brain and I'm like swirling and getting lost in the stories. I like to just kind of get calm and I just imagine like little lights, like, oh, that's what's happening right now. My brain's just got firing, lots of firing going on right now. But we react to them as like they're the absolute truth, when in reality, all thoughts are nuanced and sometimes they're just plain out false, but we're believing them like they're true. And especially the negative thoughts we tell ourselves in this environment. You know, we're often stuck in our negative stories and we lean into like black and white thinking. And even I kind of like to think of my mind, parts in my mind that have stories as kind of dramatic. We use words like never, always, we make it global, right? Like I'm incompetent, like this global statement, or like I'm failing, or I'm not doing enough, like huge, broad statements, right? And so this goal is really to kind of claw back our control over what's happening in our mind and to not take it so seriously and not be so attached. So again, peering under the hood means that we're having to be mindful of what we're thinking. Okay. So the first step of cognitive reframing is noticing the thoughts that we're thinking, noticing the automatic thought. And the easiest way I found to do this is after the fact. So finding a situation that was stressful for you and peering under the hood by the life coach Brooke Castillo says to do like a thought download. So you think about the situation and you think, okay, what happened in this scenario? Like if a video camera was watching and I could just record the details, what happened, and then what did I think about this situation? And write down, you might have a lot of thoughts. So just take like 2 minutes and just like jot down all the thoughts that you're thinking and see if there's any patterns and pick one of those thoughts that you're like, oh my gosh, I probably think that all the time. I can't remember the research that shows how many thoughts we think in a day, but they're predominantly repetitive and they're predominantly negative as humans. That's just what happens. So you probably have some repeating stories that happen. So we're going to notice the automatic thought, and then you're going to take just a pause and say, okay, what's the cascade from this thought? And we're going to practice this together. So we're going to question it, question your thoughts. You just get a little bit of space, and you're like, oh, when I think this, this happens, and then this, and oh my gosh. Usually we see it creates like a cycle or a pattern. And then we're going to pause and we're going to choose a more helpful perspective, a more balanced one. We're going to find evidence for, different things, and we're going to choose a different thought. And that oftentimes takes a while, and it's not about um, toxic positivity or affirmations. This isn't about like choosing a more positive thought. I would say it's like you're trying to find one that's more neutral. When we think I'm a failure, it feels awful inside our bodies and it isn't helpful or useful, right? So we're just trying to take it down a notch, like realize, oh my gosh, my brain's doing that firing thing again. How can I calm down and how can I choose something that you want it to still feel real inside of you? And that's why affirmation, it's been shown that if you go to like a positive affirmation, it often doesn't work because it's too far a stretch for your brain. If you say, I'm a failure, and then you say, I'm so super successful, like your brain's not going to believe it. And it creates like a backwash inside of you. And it's also not super helpful. So we want to just find a neutral thought. And that's really what the reframe is about, is finding something that you're like, oh, I could see how that also could be true and is more helpful. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and practice this one real quick. And this is probably the hardest one. It takes some time and practice, and all of these do take time. And I know y'all are all strapped for time. And I just want to say, put it in little drips. Like this doesn't have to be like an epic self-compassion session or, I have to figure out all my thoughts and shift them. Like take really tiny actions and they will build, and put it in where you can. And I am going to encourage you to put it in where you can, even when it feels like there's no time, because ultimately it will save you time, because all of this drama that happens inside of ourselves creates situations where oftentimes we lose time to the struggle that's happening inside of ourselves. And we could reclaim that time and energy to put forward to facing the things that we're facing in the moment. All right. So get out whatever it is that you've been reflecting with, or I invite you to. And I'm going to ask you to think of a situation where you recently felt overwhelmed. And again, don't pick something on a 10, just something that's a little bit lower. Not a 1, but something that has some charge but isn't going to flood you in this moment thinking about it. And I want you to write down what happened in the situation, just as if a video camera was recording it, so that anyone reading your description could be like, oh, yeah, if they were there, they would agree with those facts. We're trying to find the observation and the facts and make that separate than the thought. Because we encounter things that are more observation and then we add our meaning on top of it. And we're just trying to get to like the base thing that happened. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to go a little bit fast, but just trying to get you to understand what the process is. So you name what happened and then track like 1 or 2 thoughts. Just see like, what is the first thought that comes up around this situation where I felt overwhelmed? And I know for me, just as an example, when I'm overwhelmed, I'm thinking I'm not working hard enough. That's a predominant thought of like, I have to figure this out faster. I'm not doing enough. And once you have your thought, we're just going to explore what is that waterfall that comes from it. So when you think this thought, and my thought was like, I'm not working hard enough, insert your thought in there, and then pick a feeling. What is the predominant feeling that comes from that thought? And we don't want more thoughts. We really want that feeling, that experience, like fear, anger, sadness. Mine is anxiety. It could be overwhelm for you, could just be stress, could be fear. So pick one feeling word and then ask yourself, when I feel this way, what do I do? What actions do I take or not take because I'm feeling this way, because I'm thinking this thought and feeling this way? So I know for me, I like frantically or randomly do work. When I say I'm not working hard enough, I start just doing random things. Or I make like endless plans about how to get more done, which is not usually helping me get more done. I stress out when I need to relax, and sometimes I worry instead of sleep. So what do you do or not do? Maybe when you're stressed, you like turn to food. I've done this and like you're binge eating and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is not helping me. And it creates a whole nother stress pattern, right? Sometimes we avoid or we're like, I'm just gonna like zone out on my phone and scroll. And then you've lost another hour, right? And you feel even more overwhelmed. So then I want you to notice again, we've already kind of jumped there, but like, what's that result? What ends up happening there? When you get to that place and you follow this pattern, how is that helping you or not helping you? Okay. And then I want you to just shake it off. Like, okay, so this is happening. And the most important thing is that I don't want you to start judging yourself for having this thought, because that's what most of us do. We're like, I'm having this negative thought and it's creating a bad result in my life, and I don't like that. I need to change it. And that's not the thing that we want to do. We really want to bring in that self-compassion and be like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to be human and have all these negative thoughts that just get reinforced over time that are not helpful. This is true for everyone, not alone in this. Okay. So once we've shaken that off and we're feeling in a, it's really important to come up with a new reframe once we've kind of grounded and we're not in a super stressed out place. We don't want to be in a self-critical place when we're trying to find a new reframe. Okay. So to find a reframe, it really helps to kind of find evidence for and evidence against the thought. So, like, I might have, because your brain will come up with it anyway, right? If I say I'm not working hard enough, my brain's giving me lots of examples of where I'm not working hard enough, which is why it feels true. It's because our brains just find evidence for things that we're thinking. That's how they work. And so you want to write those down so it gets out of your brain, and that part of you is like, okay, you're listening to me. Like, this is why it's important. So you say, okay, here are all the reasons that, like, I think I'm not working hard enough. Like, I didn't get these things done. This is on my list. Like, I took an hour's rest or whatever it is that I'm holding against myself. So write that down. It's evidence for the thought. And then flipping it. And this is a really important skill. I was talking to, we weren't working on burnout. I was helping him and his wife about decision making, but he's an ER doc. And he was saying that this part of cognitive reframing has been really helpful for him because it matches what he does in the ER, which is kind of questioning, where are my assumptions wrong here? So if you have this thought of like, I'm not working hard enough, now I want to find evidence that shows me that it's not true. Where can I offer evidence that I'm not thinking of in this moment because my brain has narrowed? And I'm going to write down like, well, I got these things done and here's where I've been probably overworking, and I'm just giving myself information. And like what that's also doing is that when we have these negative thoughts, we're zooming, we're narrowing in, and what we want to do is zoom back out. We want to have a wider perspective. We want to take in more information. Okay. And I invite you to do that too. Where's evidence for your thought being true and accurate? And what's the evidence that shows that it's maybe not true? And then coming up with a thought that feels more accurate. So for me, I just was thinking, and it's a series of thoughts, but I am getting things done. I still have things left to do. It just names the situation in a different way and doesn't make it like I'm not doing enough. That then makes me spiral. It's like I am doing things and I still have things left to do. And then that puts me in the driver's seat again and says, what's the plan with prioritization so I get the most important things done? And I know when I like go through this exercise and I feel that thought, I feel more centered. I check back in and I say, okay, if I reframe this thought to be like this, how does it feel in my body? And always check in because that's going to be your clue. If you've reframed it to something that's too far and it's in that positivity place, it's a stretch and you check in and you're like, no, that's stupid. That's not true. Like, don't choose that thought. That's not a good thought to practice in that situation. You want to find one that you're like, okay, that's believable. Like, it might be a little bit hard, but there's some level of truth and it feels more neutral in your body. It doesn't even have to feel great. You don't have to feel happy or positive or motivated, but it has to take down that level. So instead of the anxiety that I was feeling before, I feel more calm. I might still have some anxiety, but I feel more calm. It's more neutral. Okay. And there's tons of different ways to question your thoughts and like get loosened from them. So don't, if this practice itself doesn't work, feel free to email me. I'm always happy to answer questions and I'll send you more tools. There's lots of different ways. And so if this way isn't working for you, know that there's other tools out there that could be just the right fit. And that same couple, the ER doc, and she's a teacher, she actually needs a different process to get to a different reframe. And so it just shows that there's different things work for different people. All right. So we've got self-compassion, treating yourself like a friend, growth mindset, using your skills, remembering that your skills can improve with effort and feedback, and then cognitive reframing, catching those unhelpful thoughts and shifting perspective. All right, so I know we're bumping right up against the hour, and I wanted to give you guys a really hands-on experience of what those things are. And then I'm going to touch on just a couple things that I know are coming up for you. They come up for me. They're common to all people, but I know when I talk to physicians, these are the things that are top. And I actually asked, I'm coaching a resident. She's an orthopedic surgeon resident. And I asked her, like, what should I talk about? And she was like, well, probably comparison. Because that's a big thing, especially since a lot of you are probably either on the track for surgery or thinking about it. Like it's a really competitive field and you're always looking around at like, what are other people doing? And you're constantly being evaluated and compared to your peers and you're doing that yourself. So comparison, just kind of this idea that like other people are ahead of me or better than me, doing more. And the example that she shared, the like kind of mindset that she thinks of that I want to pass along because it was so great, was thinking about when you're in comparison mode to try to think about being in a yoga class. And she had this kind of tagline of like, stay on your yoga mat. Because if you've ever been in a yoga class, you want to stay on your mat, you want to focus on where you are, on your pose, your body, how you're doing the thing. Because as soon as you start looking around the room and saying, like, how are they doing this or this, you start to get wobbly and lose your focus. And oftentimes, when we're comparing ourselves, we're comparing what's going on for us. We have access to everything that's going on for us, all the internal thoughts and struggles, all the whole experience. And we're comparing that to what someone looks at on the outside. So one, it's not even an equal comparison. It's just like how someone's showing up and what we can see on the outside versus like what we feel on the inside. So it's really important in medicine to, I would say, use a growth mindset and self-compassion to really help yourself in that moment. So like let's say that like the residency, invites are coming in for like your best friend and you haven't heard anything, it's really easy to fall into that comparison place and start down that negative thought cycle. And so to remember, like, I need to stay on my mat, and what do I need in this moment to stay centered? And what do I need to reframe? And how can I care for myself in this moment? And even acknowledging that it kind of stinks, like, so it's not about, denying the reality, but it is also about not like falling into this place of, a negative spiral. It's about staying centered and making yourself a safe place to be in. Um, let's see, imposter syndrome. This often comes, I feel like, it's hard because high achievers feel this, which is so interesting. Sometimes the better that you're doing, the more of an imposter that you feel, which is so interesting to me. But I work with a lot of women who have moved in medicine into like leadership positions. And so it's like a slightly different skill set. And all of a sudden they're like being looked to as a leader. And it brings up all this stuff of like, I have all these insecurities and I don't quite know what I'm doing. And what if they find out? That's really the fear. And again, it's so common. That piece of common humanity is just that reminder of like, oh yeah, everyone feels this way. It's not actually even a flaw. And to just try and be kind to yourself in this moment. I have one client who I loved her reframe. She was just like, if I'm feeling these feelings, it means I'm in the right room. She was thinking of it as like a stretch. Like, okay, if I'm here, this means I'm at my growth edge. So she reinterpreted how she was feeling as an imposter and being like, okay, this means that I'm meant to be here, which is quite a positive jump. But she was using it of like every time that I've like stretched myself into the next thing that I knew was right for me, this feeling has come up and it hasn't ever meant that I wasn't supposed to be here. In fact, it's been that next stepping stone that has led me to the next thing that I needed to be doing. Um, and then I just want to again name feedback of you're going to receive so much feedback. And a lot of times we focus on the negative feedback. So let's say you get some feedback back and it's like, you know, four positive comments and then one critical one. And our brains, because we have a negativity bias, will zero out, like we zoom in on that negative, and that's the thing we keep replaying. And so using these tools to really be able to like zoom back out and use that growth mindset to be like, okay, feedback is information. And then determining if it's useful. Like, hopefully, you're receiving lots of useful critical feedback. But, like, you can see on the internet, people give critical feedback all the time that is unhelpful and unuseful. Like, your outfit's stupid, or I don't like the way you look, or, you know, something stupid like that. Like, you won't be receiving that, hopefully, ever in your training. But a lot of times it's like you look at feedback and you're like, oh, like, is that even accurate? Like, does this even match what it is? And so to have that, I think when you're calm inside and you can come from a perspective where you're not feeling defended because you're not defending your self-worth and you can actually be curious, you can look at the feedback and be like, oh, yeah, that's probably true. Like I could work on improving this area and then make a plan. And then when you receive feedback that you're like, no one's given this to me before, I've actually received the opposite feedback. Maybe like having that centered perspective of like, huh, maybe I don't have to worry so much about this. Like I can be reflective and think like, is this something I need to work on? Maybe even get more feedback to understand what it is. But you don't have to, it doesn't mean that all feedback is good, but it does mean having these tools means that you can be centered in receiving that, knowing that it's just information. Sometimes we receive critical feedback and it's actually information about the other person and where they were on that day or a belief system that they have that you don't have to agree with. And a lot of times it can be information that actually helps us grow. So I just want you to look through this list and think like, where are the places that I'm struggling the most? What is the like key thing? Is there one area here that I want to apply one of these tools to? Again, remember we're dripping it. This is lifelong work. Like it is not a one and done thing. It isn't something that's like, you know, you do this workshop and all of a sudden you have it, or you even do a ton of workshops. I have done tons and tons of training on self-compassion, and I still struggle to be kind to myself. Lifelong work. So picking one of these struggles or a different one, I probably didn't name them all here, and thinking like, what's one way that I can apply this week, this month? What's a tool that resonates with me that I want to try out? And again, I guarantee you, common humanity, all of the people in your program are having these same struggles. Again, different degrees, different areas, all these things, but you are not alone. It is not a flaw, and nothing's wrong with you. It just means you're human and you're in medical school. Okay, okay, just to recap. So, self-compassion, reminding you that it's not a weakness, it's really a strength, and it can be a tool to become your own best friend, be your own ally, stick up, have your own back. And then a growth mindset, again, just making room for mistakes, trying to remind yourself that all skills can be developed. You can always improve. You can always improve. And then reframing, really changing and shifting the story that you tell yourself over time and noticing how that becomes more helpful. It becomes this positive feedback loop. Again, I just want you to encourage you one more time to just take one tool, take one piece of a tool, look at the handout, take it, try it out. If you have questions, I put a lot of resources on the handout as well of like other places that you can go look. There's a ton of information about all of these things. Take what you've already known about some of these things and just say, oh, that was a good reminder. Like, I'm going to restart that again. Um, and then I want to say thank you before we go to questions. Just thank you for letting me be in this space. As a non-physician, I feel privileged to be here and I love physicians. That's why I coach them because I just love their brains. So I hope that you're leaving with not just like these vague ideas, but some tools and just a little bit more of that 1% more kindness for yourself on this path.
Thank
And then
you.
I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much for taking the time and all of the lessons as I've said earlier, they are so applicable and it truly is a lifelong journey. I remember being rather naive and thinking, oh, once I match in orthopedics, I'm finally going to get over this imposter syndrome. I'm finally going to feel like I belong. And here I am, a fourth year orthopedic resident applying for fellowship, and I'm still struggling with the same feelings of I'm still not good enough, I'm not smart enough and recognizing that that doesn't mean that we're failing on that journey, but that is being cognizant of, oh, yeah, I'm still having those thoughts. What are my tools that have helped me get to where I am now? So I hope everyone in this that has joined us today, if you feel like that, if you feel like once I achieve this thing, I match into orthopedics or I get to this area, now everything's fine, reminding yourself that that unfortunately is not the case. And these tools are things that just take practice. And there are so many people that like, Jennifer for me was one of those like the pivoting kind of lectures, what things that was like, oh, how can I make this shift? And then trying to find those allies that can help remind you that as long as you are being open to feedback, you are trying to learn, you're not letting your ego get in the way, and you're trying to always find a way to make a positive impact. If you can go to bed at night knowing those things are true, you are going to do incredible things. So I hope everyone here learned a lot. And thank you so much again, Jennifer, for taking the time. And I hope the students here can take those same lessons and accomplish even greater and better things, in the future than they probably think they were ever capable of.
Agreed. I echo that.
Are there any questions from the audience? I don't see any in the chat. If you do, please feel free to speak up. All right. And with that, thank you again for your time. I hope everyone here has a great rest of your evening. And thank you again, Jennifer. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.